There's a common misconception in the fitness industry that more volume equals more gains, but that couldn't be further from the truth. When it comes to volume, less is more. And the latest scientific literature from Chris Bradley about frequency and volume confirms this. So the first set of a given workout is the most stimulating set of them all. You need 5 more fucking sets to match the stimulus of the first set. So you'll be doing 6 sets just to in actuality get 2 sets. Which means that if you're trying to maximize your hypertrophy or muscle growth results, opting for a training style that maximizes the frequency of those first sets within a week would be the best approach, as higher frequency training also minimizes the time we spend in atrophy, so your body isn't constantly in a growth state. Just pinheads or PED heads would be growing all the time. Natural lifters are growing for 48 hours after workout, and after that the atrophy period kicks in. So no matter how many sets you do, after 48 hours, atrophy, which means muscle loss, always kicks in. So with that first set and trying to maximize the frequency of the first set, you not only get the most stimulating set of them all, but also you minimize the time you spend in atrophy, which means that every time atrophy kicks in, after 48 hours, you are hitting the muscle again and getting the most stimulating set of them all. Which means that opting for a training style that maximizes the frequency we get those first and most stimulating set throughout the week and minimizing the time you spend in atrophy will be the best for maximum muscle growth and hypertrophy, which is the same thing, but you get the gist. Which is also confirmed by another study which looked at 2 groups and 2 individual training styles. So group 1 did high volumes and low frequency, just like in a bro split, and the other group did high frequency and low volume, like in a full body split, and the low volume, high frequency group got far better results. But bro, what the fuck does that have to do with how much volume I should do? So you cannot just train with high frequencies and spam your body with volume into the fucking oblivion. You need to pick the right volume accordingly that allows you to train with the high frequency, as more volume for a specific muscle group within a single workout accumulates more muscle damage and more fatigue. Muscle damage and fatigue are negative mechanisms for hypertrophy. Your muscles don't get torn down and grown bigger. We want to minimize the amount of muscle damage and fatigue we generate while maximizing the amount of sets we can do within a single workout. And by that, you can already imagine weekly volume guidelines are absolute bullshit, and you should not decide how many sets you do within a workout by how much weekly sets you do, but you should look at how many sets can I perform within a single workout while still optimizing my performance, optimizing progressive overload, and optimizing muscle growth by reducing muscle damage and fatigue. So here are my per muscle group per session volume guidelines that you can use to maximize performance and therefore muscle growth results. So for a 2 sleep frequency, resting muscle for 48 hours before hitting it again, like in a full body split, opting for 1 to 2 sets at maximum would be the best option here. For a 3 sleep frequency, opting to hit a muscle every 72 hours, like in a upper lower split, choosing between 2 or 4 sets per muscle group per session would be bueno. For a 4 sleep frequency, resting a muscle for 96 hours, like in a push-pull leg split or Arnold split, which isn't high frequency, but again, I will just give it to you. So if you choose those splits that you don't overwork yourself, opting for 4 to 6 sets per muscle group per session would be best here. So when training with higher frequencies and adjusting our volume to that frequency, we want to take crossover volume into account. This is especially important if you're training with a higher frequency, and especially important with an exclamation mark if you're training on a full body split. So let's say you do 2 sets of a lat pull down or a pull up and an upper back row. The lats and the upper back have different functions. The upper back or the traps function and protraction and retraction, and the lats do shoulder extension and shoulder adduction, and you want to separate the volume of those 2 muscle groups, so that would equal to 2 sets of lats and 2 sets of upper back and not 4 sets of back. But on the other hand, when you look at your pressing exercises, you want to take overlapping volume into account. So let's say you do 3 pressing exercises in a single workout. The first one would be like a flat bench, the second one shoulder press, and the third one dip variation. So when looking at the chest specifically, every single of these pressing variations hits it in some kind of way. The flat bench variation hits the chest as a whole. The shoulder press variation only hits the upper chest and not the lower and mid pecs. And the dip variation primarily hits the lower and mid pecs, which means that if you do one set for each of those 3 exercises, it wouldn't amount to 3 sets of chest, but 2 sets. But a set, when it comes to how fatiguing it is, doesn't equal the same for every single muscle group, as some muscle groups recover faster than others. The reason for this is the muscle fiber type and the voluntary activation levels of a given muscle. So if you have a fast twitch muscle and a high voluntary activation level, that muscle group will recover slower than a slow twitch and low activation, voluntary activation, blah 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 muscle. You get the gist. So for the slow recovering muscle groups, I would advise you to experiment a bit, adjust your volume, adjust your intensity, maybe do a bit of the lower end of the given set guideline zones per workout that I gave you. Maybe introduce some reps in reserve work, 1 to 2 reps reserved at max, so you can match the recovery of the faster recovering muscle groups and train them all in a single workout without overthinking it too much. Hello me from the past, you fucking dumbass. You forgot to mention that the resistance profile of an exercise also plays a huge role on how many sets you can do within a single workout. We all got consumed into the debate that the stretch bias movements are more superior than shortened bias movements, but none of those influencers who preach that take the muscle damage and the post-workout fatigue that comes with stretch bias movements into consideration. One set of stretch bias movement may give you a slightly bit more growth for some muscle groups, as not every muscle group benefits from stretch, as I mentioned in other videos, but the fatigue cost may not be worth it when training for higher frequency protocol, as one set of a stretch bias movement gives you much more fatigue and muscle damage than one set on a shortened bias movement. So when it comes to programming, when training for high frequency protocol, you don't have much room for error, which means that you need to be really precise with your exercise selection, so you don't spam stretch bias movements. Maybe you have 2 exercises per day for a single muscle group. It could be a viable option to just do shortened or mid bias movements for those 2 movements, or you could do 1 shortened bias movement and 1 stretch bias movement. Just don't spam stretch bias movements, don't spam the volume on them, maybe leave some reps in reserve so you don't overly fatigue yourself if you are training for high frequency protocol, and you'll be good. If all of this sounds great, but you don't know how the fuck to apply all of this knowledge in a cohesive program, make sure to check the link down below to check out my coaching, and see you there, brother.